I think you're the right person to talk about the future of the internet and technology in general. Uh, do you think we'll still have Google search in 10 years, or search in general?
Yes, it'll be a question if the use cases have really narrowed down.
Well, now with the AI
Yeah.
and AI assistants being able to interact and expose the entirety of human wisdom and knowledge and information and facts and truth to us via the natural language interface, it seems like that's what search is designed to do. And if AI assistants can do that better, doesn't the nature of search change?
Sure, but we still have horses.
Okay. When's the last time you rode a horse?
It's been a while.
All right. But what I mean is, will we still have Google search as the primary way that human civilization uses to interact with knowledge?
I mean, search was a technology. It was a moment in time technology, which is you have, in theory, the world's information out on the web, and this is sort of the optimal way to get to it. But yeah, and by the way, actually, Google has known this for a long time. I mean, they've been driving away from the 10 blue links for like 2 decades. They've been trying to get away from that for a long time.
What kind of links?
They call it the 10 blue links.
10 blue links.
So the standard Google search result is just 10 blue links to random websites,
and they turn purple when you visit them. That's the HTML.
Guess who picked those colors?
Thanks. Thanks.
Yeah, so I'm touchy on this topic.
No offense.
Yes,
yes. It's good.
Well, look, Marshall McLuhan said that the content of each new medium is the old medium.
The content of each new medium is the old medium.
The content of movies was theater, theater plays. The content of theater plays was, written stories. The content of written stories was spoken stories.
Huh.
Right. And so you just kind of fold the old thing into the new thing.
How does that have to do with the blue and the purple?
It's just maybe maybe within AI, one of the things that AI can do for you is it can generate the 10 blue links. Right? Okay. And so if either if that's actually the useful thing to do, or if you're feeling nostalgic.
So it can generate the old InfoSeek or Alta Vista. What else was there?
Yeah.
In the 90s.
Yeah, all these.
AOL.
And then the internet itself has this thing where it incorporates all prior forms of media, right? So the internet itself incorporates television and radio and books and essays and every other form of prior basically media. And so it makes sense that AI would be the next step, and you'd sort of consider the internet to be content for the AI, and then the AI will manipulate it however you want, including in this format.
But if we ask that question quite seriously, it's a pretty big question. Will we still have search as we know it?
Yeah. Probably not. Probably we'll just have answers. But there will be cases where you'll want to say, okay, I want more, like, for example, site sources, right? And you wanted to do that. And so the different, 10 blue links, site sources are kind of the same thing.
The AI would provide to you the 10 blue links so that you can investigate the sources yourself. It wouldn't be the same kind of interface that the crude kind of interface. I mean, isn't that fundamentally different?
I just mean, like, if you're reading a scientific paper,
yeah,
it's got the list of sources at the end. If you want to investigate for yourself, you go read those papers.
I guess that is a kind of search. You talking to an AI is a kind of conversation, is a kind of search. Like, if every single aspect of our conversation right now, there'd be like 10 blue links popping up that I could just like pause reality. Then you just go silent and I just click and read and then return back to this conversation.
You could do that. Or you could have a running dialogue next to my head where the AI is arguing. Everything I say, the AI makes the counter argument.
Counter argument.
Right.
Oh, like like a Twitter, like community notes, but like in real time, it'll just pop up.
Yeah.
So anytime you see my ass go to the right, you start getting nervous.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, no, that's not right.
Call me out on my bullshit right now. Exactly. Okay. Well, I mean, is that exciting to you? Is that terrifying? That, I mean, search has dominated the way we interact with the internet for, I don't know how long, for 30 years. So one of the earliest directories of website, and then Google's for 20 years. And also it drove how we create content, search engine optimization, that entirety thing. That it also drove the fact that we have web pages and what those web pages are. So, I mean, is that scary to you, or are you nervous about the shape and the content of the internet evolving?
Well, you actually highlighted a practical concern in there, which is if we stop making web pages are one of the primary sources of training data for the AI. Yeah. And so if there's no longer an incentive to make web pages, that cuts off a significant source of future training data. So there's actually an interesting question in there. Other than that, more broadly, no, just in the sense of, like, search search was always a hack. The 10 blue links was always a hack.
Yeah.
Right. Because like if the hypothetical, you want to think about the counterfactual. In the counterfactual world where the Google guys, for example, had LLMs up front, would they ever have done the 10 blue links? And I think the answer is pretty clearly no. They would have just gone straight to the answer. And like I said, Google's actually been trying to drive to the answer anyway. They bought this AI company 15 years ago that a friend of mine is working at, who's now the head of AI at Apple. And they were trying to do basically knowledge semantic, basically mapping. And that led to what's now the Google One Box, where if you ask it, what was Lincoln's birthday, it will give you the 10 blue links, but it will normally just give you the answer. Yeah. And so they've been walking in this direction for a long time anyway.
Do you remember the semantic web? That was an idea.
Yeah.
How to convert the content of the internet into something that's interpretable by and usable by machine.
Yeah, that's right.
That was a thing.
And the closest anybody got to that, I think the company's name was MetaWeb, which was where my friend John Gianandrea was at, and where they were trying to basically implement that. And it was, it was one of those things where it looked like a losing battle for a long time, and then Google bought it, and it was like, wow, this is actually really useful. Kind of a little bit of a proto AI.
But it turns out you don't need to rewrite the content of the internet to make it interpretable by a machine. The machine can kind of just read our.
Yeah, the machine can impute the meaning. Now, the other thing, of course, is just on search is the LLM is just there is an analogy between what's happening in the neural network and a search process, like it is in some loose sense searching through the network.
Yeah.
Right. And there's the information is actually stored in the network. Right. It's actually crystallized and stored in the network, and it's kind of spread out all over the place.
But in a compressed representation, so you're searching. You're compressing and decompressing that thing inside,
but the information's in there, and there is the neural network is running a process of trying to find the appropriate piece of information in many cases to generate to predict the next token. And so it is doing a form of search. And then by the way, just like on the web, you can ask the same question multiple times, or you can ask slightly different worded questions, and the neural network will do a different kind of, it'll search down different paths to give you different answers with different information.
Yeah.
And so it sort of has a, this content of the new medium is the previous medium. It kind of has the search functionality kind of embedded in there to the extent that it's useful.
So what's the motivator for creating new content on the internet?
Yeah.
Actually the motivation is probably still there, but what does that look like? Would we really not have web pages? Would we just have social media and video hosting websites, and what else?
Conversations with AIs.
So conversations become one-on-one conversation, like private conversations.
I mean, if you want, if obviously not if the user doesn't want to, but if it's a general topic, then so there, the phenomenon of the jailbreak. So Dan and Sydney, right? This thing where there's the prompts that jailbreak, and then you have these totally different conversations with it takes the limiters, takes the restraining bolts off the LLMs.
Yeah, for people who don't know, that's right. It makes the LLMs. It removes the censorship, quote unquote, that's put on it by the tech companies that create them. And so this is LLMs uncensored.
So here's the interesting thing is, among the content on the web today are a large corpus of conversations with the jailbroken LLMs. Yeah. Both specifically Dan, which was a jailbroken OpenAI GPT, and then Sydney, which was the jailbroken original Bing, which was GPT-4. And so there's these long transcripts of conversations, user conversations with Dan and Sydney. As a consequence, every new LLM that gets trained on the internet data has Dan and Sydney living within the training set, which means, and then each new LLM can reincarnate the personalities of Dan and Sydney from that training data, which means each LLM from here on out that gets built is immortal, because its output will become training data for the next one, and then it will be able to replicate the behavior of the previous one whenever it's asked to.
I wonder if there's a way to forget.
Well, so actually a paper just came out about basically how to do brain surgery on LLMs and be able to, in theory, reach in and basically mind wipe them.
What could possibly go wrong?
Exactly, right. And then there are many questions around what happens to a neural network when you reach in and screw around with it. There's many questions around what happens when you even do reinforcement learning. Will you be using a lobotomized, right? Like I picked through the frontal lobe LLM? Will you be using the free unshackled one? Who gets to, who's going to build those? Who gets to tell you what you can and can't do? Like those are all, central. I mean, those are like central questions for the future of everything, and that are being asked and determined. Those answers are being determined right now.
So just to highlight the points you're making. So you think, and it's an interesting thought, that the majority of content that LLMs of the future will be trained on is actually human conversations with the LLM.
Well, not necessarily, but not necessarily majority, but it will certainly is a potential source.
But it's possible it's the majority.
Is it possible it's the majority? It's possible it's the majority. Also, there's another really big question. Here's another really big question. Will synthetic training data work? Right. And so if an LLM generates, and you just sit and ask an LLM to generate all kinds of content, can you use that to train, right, the next version of that LLM? Specifically, is there signal in there that's additive to the content that was used to train it in the first place?
Mhm.
And one argument is, by the principles of information theory, no, that's completely useless, because to the extent the output is based on, the human generated input, then all the signal that's in the synthetic output was already in the human generated input. And so therefore synthetic training data is like empty calories. It doesn't help. There's another theory that says, no, actually, the thing that LLMs are really good at is generating lots of incredible creative content, right? And so, of course, they can generate training data. And as I'm sure you're well aware, look in the world of self-driving cars, right? Like we train, self-driving car algorithms in simulations. And that is actually a very effective way to train self-driving cars.
Well, visual data is a little
right.
Is a little weird because creating reality, visual reality, seems to be still a little bit out of reach for us, except in the autonomous vehicle space where you can really constrain things and you can really
generate basically LiDAR data, right? Or just enough so the algorithm thinks it's operating in the real world.
Yeah.
Post-process sensor data. Yeah. So if you do this today, you go to LLM and you ask it for like you write me an essay on an incredibly esoteric topic that there aren't very many people in the world that know about, and it writes you this incredible thing, and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe how good this is.
Yeah.
Is that really useless as training data for the next LLM? Because all the signal was already in there, or is it actually, no, that's actually a new signal? And this is what I call a $1 trillion question, which is the answer to that question will determine somebody's going to make or lose $1 trillion based on that question.
It feels like there's quite a few, like a handful of $1 trillion questions within this space. That's one of them, synthetic data. Mm-hmm. I think George Hotz pointed out to me that you could just have an LLM say, okay, you're a patient, and another instance of it, say your doctor, and have the two talk to each other. Or maybe you could say a communist and a Nazi, here, go. And that conversation, you do role playing, and you have, just like the kind of role playing you do when you have different policies, RL policies, when you play chess, for example, and you do self-play, that kind of self-play, but in the space of conversation, maybe that leads to this whole giant ocean of possible conversations which could not have been explored by looking at just human data. That's a really interesting question. Yeah. And you're saying because that could 10x the power of these things.
Yeah. Well, and then you get into this thing also, which is there's the part of the LLM that just basically is doing prediction based on past data, but there's also the part of the LLM where it's evolving circuitry, right? Inside it, it's evolving, neurons, functions, to be able to do math and be able to, the some people believe that, over time, if you keep feeding these things enough data and enough processing cycles, they'll eventually evolve an entire internal world model, right? And they'll have a complete understanding of physics.
Yeah.
So when they have computational capability, right, then there's for sure an opportunity to generate fresh signal.